Welcome back. I'm so sorry I happened to be very fast. So this is what I'm going to do because I'm aware that I was fast, hoping that I may not be able to complete the content. So I'm going to take at least plus minus 5 minutes, or no, let's make it 10, wherein I'll be showing the slides slowly for those who would like to take some notes to get the opportunity to do so, especially on the purposes, as this was requested by some of the people out there. I'll be going a bit slower on purposes of each one, and advantages, disadvantages as well, will also be shown for quite some time. Thank you very much. Now this is the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. The purposes, like I indicated, to make sure that labor practices are applied by employers and to determine exactly how workers must be treated in the workplace. This is designed to protect workers against exploitation and unfair labor practices. Workers will not be allowed to work very long hours. This is protecting them against that. Children under the age will not be working, child labor. This is protecting them against that. The third one, it includes details about the work hours, the child labor, basic remuneration, overtime remuneration, work conditions, the leaves. And this is well explained and tabled in DICS. Here is just a summary that I have. If you may also refer to DICS, it's well explained there, and they are explained in tables, and that makes it easy for you to understand. Okay, and then from there, I think you won't have a problem with who the Act does not actually apply to, because the information is the same as the one that appears in your books. There's no addition, it's everything that is in your books. The National Defence Force, National Intelligence Agency, South African Secret Service, rendering free service, workers who work less than 24 hours, the sales staff who are traveling, that I don't think you'll have much problems with. I can also go a bit slow on the maximum length of working week, which is 45 hours. Let me just put them there for learners to write. Employees may work for 6 days, and if they work for 6 days, the maximum time allowed for them to work would be 8 hours only. If they work 5 days in a week, they can only work up to 9 hours. But if they want to work for overtime, the overtime may not be more than 10 hours in a week. They may work for overtime as agreed between the employer and the employee, whether they are actually working for 5 or for 6 days in a week. Added together, the time for overtime cannot be more than 10 hours. Those who are working overtime, there's that extra money given or wage given to them, 1.5 times the normal wage. Working on Sundays, those who are working on public holidays, should they work there, especially for the Sunday ones? If they are not normally working on Sundays, it will be doubled. Those who will be having holidays during the week, they need to be paid full amount of money, even if they may not be at work. Should they be required to come to work, it will then be double the wage. But those who are working on Sundays normally, and they are there, it's just 1.5 times the normal wage. It's different from the public ones. And the 21 consecutive days leave for a person who has been working for more than 12 months also has to be given with full pay. If it's about sick, the sick leave, 36 days in a cycle of 3 years. If it's family responsibility, only 3 days. And it's clearly indicated in the book who those people are, when will you qualify to apply for this one. For your spouse, who could be sick, your child, or your parent. For adoption, that can be granted. Maternity, 4 months paid. For those who work between 2,300 hours and 6 in the morning, or for 5 times or more than 50 times a year, in the past they would not be regarded as people who have rights. But because of this act now, they also have rights and must also be respected. Workers cannot be forced to work or accept any work that is against their will. No child under the age of 15 should be working. 18 years still have restrictions, may not work in the wine and casino industry. If a person wants to leave the work and the person has been working for less than 6 months, a week's notice is given. If it's 6 months and more, but less than a year, 2 weeks notice is required. If a person has been working for a year or longer than a year, a 4-week notice is needed. But say the person has been working for that period, 1 year or more, but is still on probation, just 1 week notice will do. For employment equity, the purpose as well. Employment Equity Act, to achieve equity in the workplace, make sure that people are treated equally, irrespective of their race, gender, HIV status. If only those people can do the work properly, they should be awarded chances. The second purpose, to promote equal opportunity and fair treatment, to implement the affirmative action in order to redress the disadvantages in the employment, to ensure equal representation of all population groups. The population that we have in a country must appear in the business, and they need to be represented fairly in the hierarchy of the business. Prohibit unfair discrimination and unjust medical testing of employees. Okay. There's a question that I should go straight to the purpose of National Credit Act, and I'm doing just that. National Credit Act, the purpose. The conditions and the rights of the consumers. The purpose of the Credit Act as required by the listeners. This would be the purpose. The purpose of the Credit Act, National Credit Act for consumers, to make sure that they prevent reckless spending, educate them to make responsible decisions, protect them against high interest rates, for debt counseling services which need to be provided. In other words, because of the Act, there are those consumers who would get credit in the past, even though they would not be in the position to pay it back. But now, because of the Act, they need to be screened well to make sure that they do not apply for a credit which is beyond their affordability. And also educate them to make responsible decisions. Not buy on credit items which they may not be needing urgently. Try to think about it before making a purchase. And because of that process wherein they would be screened, they may end up not buying. And this will be protecting them. They will end up making responsible decisions. Protect them against high interest rates. There would be instances where they would not actually be needing the credit, and if this is controlled, they are being protected from being charged high interest rates. And also assist in counseling them when they are experiencing financial challenges and problems. Providers who are credit providers are also given the responsibility to make sure that they lend money to customers or consumers in a responsible way. Not give credit to people who do not qualify for credit. Not give credit to people who are not credit worthy. People who are already struggling to pay their debts should not qualify to get those debts. To the country, to make sure that credit agreements are transparent, as the credit applicant, the consumer, I need to know the process. Even when I do not qualify, I need to be informed in writing. Everything should be explained to me as to what is it that is making me fail not to qualify, and this should be done fairly. Anyone who qualifies, irrespective of the gender, the race, that person should be given the credit. The fact that it would be written in languages that people understand, it would be easy for them to understand the conditions of each credit they take, unlike using a language which people would not understand, but only be given the clear definition or explanation of the contents when they are in trouble. But because it's in their preferred languages, they would be very careful to go through that before signing. And if there's anything that they do not understand, they would first ask before signing. And this would also provide a competitive and sustainable credit market. Also ensure the economic stability in the country. If there's no any other question, I think we may now move to the sample of questions that I have and see how they would normally ask these questions and go through them together, see how best we can practice this topic of legislation. Let's move to the other part, the questions. These questions are the questions which appeared in the November question paper since 2008 until last year, 2012. I just took sample questions from those question papers. One of them was, explain the contribution of CETAs towards ensuring that quality skills development takes place. Illustrate by using any two examples. This is a direct question which can appear in section B. And the information that was given there is also going to assist you in answering this one. For example, the contribution they have to quality development is to manage learnerships and training in each sector or CETA sector, to ensure that skills requirements of different sectors are identified, to ensure that training is of the appropriate quality, to be responsible for skills programs to improve skills of current workers, assist employed people to enter the job market by providing skills programs, and provide accreditation to facilitators and training providers. So this is just one of the questions on CETAs and the Skills Development Act. How do CETAs contribute towards ensuring quality skills development? This is one of the ways in which it can be done. Examples of CETAs. These are some of the examples. Like I indicated in the presentation, there are 28. I made an example with only 3 there. These are some of them. MQA in SETA, which is in the example. HW SETA in the example. Food BEV. FACET. ETDP, CTFL, PSETA, Services, CETA, TETA, WRS, CETA, the CHEETA, ESET, you mention them. If you need this information, you can ask your teacher to assist you with this information because it appears in the 2008 November question paper. They have this information. You may give the abbreviations or write them in full. They are written there in the memo. The second question on CETAs, just an example. How they may ask these questions. Describe how CETAs are funded. 80% is collected from skills development levy, 1% from salaries and wages of employees per month. Remember when we were talking about 250,000 in a business, and then the 1% would then be given to CETA or towards CETA, wherein 80% will be for CETAs, and then 20% will also be taken aside for national development. Increase in the income from services rendered by CETAs. That's how they can also get funds. The grants, the donations, the funding from the National Skills Development Fund, the income from surplus investment or the surplus invested. This is how they can actually be funded. What do the letters BBEE stand for? It's one common question. Remember when we talked about the abbreviations, that they are also important. In more than once, this question has been asked, and there are learners who are still not sure as to how to answer this one. broad-based black economic empowerment. 1.3, justify the introduction of the BBBEE Act by explaining any two examples. In other words, if you know the BBBEE, you should be in the position to apply the knowledge that you have acquired in there. And this is one example of a question where in application is needed. You know the triple or the 7 pillars of BBBEE. Ownership is one of them. This is how you may apply the information you have. Ownership and management, examples of the pillars. Ownership and management by black people of existing or new businesses. For example, because they said you should give an example. Black South Africans heavy majority shareholding in African rainbow minerals. As it comes in a content, they would just be saying ownership and management. Blacks should be given shares, or shares should be sold to blacks cheaply. Blacks should be given, especially the females, managerial positions. That's how they put it there. But when you put this into practice, then you take the same information and you bring in examples that you may know. There are many examples that you can come up with. And that's how you can put this into practice or apply the information or the knowledge that you have on this act. The second one could be to promote equal employment. Equity is one of the pillars. To promote equal employment opportunities to previously disadvantaged people. How is this done? Is there any example wherein this has been done? Kumba Resources employs a large number of black women. The moment we have something like this, it's when we remember there's an act which is saying blacks, especially women, should be given senior positions. Shares should be sold to them. They should be treated equally. Then this comes into picture. To say if there's a Kumba Resources which is employing a large number of women, it's trying to address the need. It's trying to comply to the BBBEE Act. The other common question is, suggest 2 ways in which BBBEE Act can be applied to a company that has a large forestry plantation. This should not confuse you. It's the same information that you know about BBBEE. The only thing now that has been put into place here is putting this knowledge that you have into practice. The example is forestry plantation. It could be another example instead of forestry plantation. But what stays the same is the information that you need to have about the broad-based black economic empowerment. The forestry company may have its transport businesses, for example. They may outsource the function to black employees. The business is able to do everything on their own. But the moment they apply the broad-based black economic empowerment, wherein blacks have to be empowered, they may take that part of the job of transport, outsource it to the black employees. The moment they do that, they are actually trying to make sure that they comply with the act. But now this is put into practice with an example of a forestry plantation. It can be any other example, like I said. They may sell shares to their black employees. That is another example of the pillars of BBBEE. Selling shares to women, black women, selling shares to blacks is also another way in which this can be put into practice. You can make an example with others up to the 7th one. State the main purpose of Employment Equity Act. Remember, I said the purpose is also very important in all these acts. To implement the affirmative action, create equal job opportunities, eliminate unfair discrimination, to achieve diversity in the workplace, address historical imbalances of the past, to ensure equal presentation or representation in the workplace. So what is important is the purpose. You need to make sure that all purposes of all these acts are known before you can go to the exam room. Then the other one, which is also equally important, is the impact. The purpose, the impact. We talked about the application earlier, how you apply this knowledge in answering these questions. Now, the one that I'm stressing is the purpose. Make sure that you know the purpose of all these acts. The third one, evaluate the impact of this act on business operations. It's important to see how it impacts all 8 acts that we have talked about, how each one of them impacts on the business. Remember that we have, during this period of transition, transformation, they will have advantages and disadvantages to businesses. They would have advantages and disadvantages to consumers, to providers if it's National Credit Act. So you also have to know that part. Employers, for example, must create opportunities for the previously disadvantaged. That is the impact this act has. Employment equity. Because people must be treated equally, such opportunities must be provided for it to take place. It cannot just be something on paper, it needs to be practiced by businesses. They don't have to discriminate. Employers must not discriminate against anyone on the basis of race, gender. It should not just appear as an act. It should be practiced. They must transform their workplace so that barriers to employment equity are eliminated. Anything that can make it difficult for equity to be realized in the business must be taken care of by employers so that everybody feels free, everybody is treated fairly in the workplace. It also has the cost implications in the implementation. It could be a good act, especially for people who were previously disadvantaged, but putting the act into practice costs money. Those are the implications. That's how it impacts on businesses. It may take some time to implement this. It may be a good thing, a good act, but it may take time to put it into practice. Hence, time consuming. This can also affect the staff turnover, especially if we have people who had a chance in the past, who may not be considered for employment now, who may not be considered for promotions now. That can affect them negatively and they may end up leaving. And this could lead to loss of qualified workers. Those who may make sure that the business achieves its goals, they may end up feeling, but it doesn't help to be in this business because I will never be promoted. Other people instead would be promoted, even though I have all the necessary skills. This also could lead to conflict in the workplace, wherein, especially if it's not applied appropriately, wherein people without skills would be preferred over people who have skills. So this is just an example of that. Proposed 2 ways, 1.8 is another common question. 2 ways in which the government can contribute to the successful implementation of this act. In other words, for the act to be implemented, what is it that the government can do? Having the act, it's not enough. Something has to be done. For all these employers to make sure that they try to comply with the act by providing incentives to those who are complying. Give some certificates to the companies that are complying. This will motivate them, encourage them to implement the act. That's the least the government can do. The other thing they can also do would be to send out inspectors to go and monitor the implementation thereof. See if companies are implementing the act. It's not only on paper. After sending their equity plans, make sure that they are implemented. Employers must also furnish regular reports to the Department of Labor on their employment equity plans. They must also find those who do not implement the act. The heavy fines they will be subjected to. For example, in the presentation, you could still remember the penalty of 500,000 to 900,000. It's a lot of money. And there's no company that would like to lose that amount of money instead of just implementing the act. Transforming the workplace through CETAs and learnerships. This can assist companies in making sure that they implement this. The other example of how they may ask questions on legislation is in the form of case studies. In this case study of Dudu Koza, who has been appointed as a sales manager at a supermarket in Soweto, her employment contract stipulates, amongst other things, the following: 10 working days annual leave, resignation when Dudu falls pregnant, 8 hours of work per day. And this is what you need to do. Dudu has approached you as a labor consultant to advise her on her basic rights in terms of the employment contract. Write a critical evaluation of the above stipulations with regard to their compliance with the requirements of the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. You are given the scenario. What must be done by a learner is to refresh himself or herself about all the contents. Remember, I said content is important. If you have the content, you are able to apply that knowledge in a scenario, in a case study. Every time you have to apply the knowledge. 10 working days annual leave. In the presentation, we said 21 consecutive days leave. But this one is 10. It means this is not fair. If it's 10 working days, it's not enough. It should be 21 consecutive days. In other words, this one contravenes the act. The second one, resignation when Dudu falls pregnant. This cannot be true. This cannot be right. You do not fire a person because she has fallen pregnant. The act stipulates this clearly, that people who are pregnant would be given a maternity leave for 4 consecutive months with pay. So if this appears, it means with the knowledge that you have, you will be able to say, but this contravenes the act, because the act allows people to actually go on maternity leave with pay. The 8 hours per day, this is one of the hours that are allocated. If people are working for 6 days, it's fine, it's appropriate. The maximum hours they may work a day is 8 hours. But if it's somebody who's working for 5 days, the 5 days would award 9 hours a day. In the case of Dudu, she will be very fortunate, because instead of working for 9 hours, she would be working only 8 hours. Unless if the overtime is included, which she needs to make sure that she agrees to. It's not imposed by the employer. These ones are just examples wherein it is indicated that the purpose is important. The recent Labor Relations Act of 1995, Act 66 of 1995, makes provision for establishment of workplace forums. Give 4 reasons why you think it was introduced. Why workplace forums are there. Like I indicated, there will be a full presentation on workplace forums under industrial relations, including the trade unions. Explain National Credit Act 2005, Act 34 of 2005, in terms of its benefits to consumers, advantages. If not benefits, it can still be advantages to consumers. We talked about advantages, disadvantages, advantages to consumers, disadvantages to consumers, advantages to the service providers, disadvantages to the service providers, advantages to the country, disadvantages to the country. That information needs to be given here. The other one, 2.4, the main purpose again of Labor Relations Act, Employment Equity Act, like I indicated, you need to know the purpose of each one of them. The objectives, when they say state 3 objectives, you would still be required to give the aim or the purpose of this Skills Development Act. The other example that I would like you to also look at is this one of National Credit Act. It explains, or they say explain, Savani's rights regarding her rejected credit application and the manner in which she was informed. Remember we said consumers have rights. If credit is rejected, they need to be informed in writing. It should be in a language they understand. The information should be given why it was rejected. That information is only reproduced in this case study. And then the other one, what is the maximum number of days allowed for family responsibility leave? We talked about different leaves: sick leave, maternity leave, family responsibility leave. We said it's only 3 days. Outline any 3 minimum conditions of employment according to Basic Conditions of Employment Act. 3 minimum conditions of employment according to Basic Conditions of Employment Act. Then you would just go through, we mentioned a number of them. The leaves, the notice, the wages, the time, 8, 9 hours. You indicate and illustrate or give examples of each. Does it apply to domestic workers? Remember when we said Basic Conditions of Employment Act does not apply to certain employees and employers. We never said anything about domestic workers. Therefore, it means domestic workers are covered by the Act. Those that are not covered were illustrated, were indicated. So this one is one of them. And then you would also give reasons why this one should be covered by the Act, because it's not one of those whom we were told that should not be part of the Act, or the Act does not cover. Here's another example of an essay type question on the Acts. Like I indicated, it can be a question in Section A, multiple choice. It can be a question in Section B, direct questions. The examples that I've given you are examples of direct questions. This one is an example of an essay. Discuss purpose, advantages, disadvantages of the National Credit Act 2005, Act 34 of 2005, to both business, the service providers, and consumers or clients. Explain the National Credit Act in terms of consumer rights and indicate what can be done when a consumer's application for credit is declined? Remember, this one is an essay. This is what you need to do. Because it's an essay, introduction is compulsory. You write the word introduction. If you do not write the word introduction, you just start introducing your topic, you will be forfeiting marks on lasso, the layout. You need to write it out, introduction. After writing the introduction, you underline it, and then you write 3 facts about the act. Those 3 facts about the act, which will be relevant to the topic, will serve as your introduction. It should be 3 points, 1 mark each, and the total for introduction will be 3. The body, and in the body, what is it that you'll be doing? You'll be writing full sentences in paragraphs, and what will be guiding you as to the information that you need to write about? The action verbs. One of them, to discuss the purpose in the question there. Discuss the purpose of National Credit Act to the service providers. Discuss the purpose of National Credit Act to consumers. Discuss the advantages of the National Credit Act to service providers. Discuss the advantages of the National Credit Act to consumers. So what is happening is you take the same action verbs, you start writing paragraphs in the body when you respond to that question. And the moment you start writing those action verbs, those headings, discuss the purpose of National Credit Act to consumers, discuss the advantages of the National Credit Act to service providers, as indicated in the question, it means you understand what the question needs. And that would also give you marks on the analysis. You are able to analyze the question. You have the introduction, it's for lasso. You will be having the conclusion with 2 points. That's for lasso. There is a body with paragraphs, then you get your 2 marks. The body has indicated subtopics of what you'll be discussing. That shows you are able to analyze this question. You will get your full 2 marks. And then from there, we go to the other aspects which are indicated there. After explaining all of them, discuss the disadvantages of the National Credit Act to the service providers, disadvantages of this to the consumers, explain their rights, the rights to consumers, and indicate what should be done if the consumer's application for credit is declined. In other words, you have indicated all those action verbs. You are going to talk about all the action verbs in the question, and this will make you get 2 marks, full 2 marks for analysis. And if you explain them correctly, you discuss them correctly, then you'd be getting 2 marks for synthesis. As you explain them and they are correct, the 2 marks for synthesis. And as you explain, discuss, you give examples that are relevant, or you come up with recent information that is relevant to the topic you are discussing, you now get another 2 marks for originality. In conclusion, you'll be summing up in 2 sentences, wherein you'll be getting 2 marks. And that will add up to the 40, the 32 points you'll be getting in the body, the introduction, and the conclusion. The 8 marks from lasso, the layout, analysis, synthesis, originality. And then you would get your 40 marks, which will be total. That's how easy you may get total in essays. The information like I indicated, make sure that you know the content of each act, what is entailed in each act. You must be able, with that information, with that knowledge, to apply it. With the same information, if they give you the scenario, they give you a case study, you will be in a better position to answer that. And remember, what is most important would be the purpose of each act, the impact they have on businesses, the content itself. You need to understand each act and not confuse them with other acts. Also remember the abbreviations, be able to write them in full. The advantages, especially in the National Credit Act, those advantages to all bodies that are concerned, the stakeholders, the consumers, the service providers, the country, as well as the disadvantage to them, the consumers, the service providers, the country. If you can remember all that information, it will be easy for you to gather as much points in the legislation as possible. These are other examples wherein the same information has been requested from different years, from different question papers in different years. 4.5. Discuss the nature and the purpose of the three legislations listed below. The purpose, the nature, the impact. You need to remember that. And you justify the impact of these acts on the successful performance of business operations. Which acts? The Basic Conditions of Employment Act, Employment Equity Act, Skills Development Act. In other words, all of them, like I indicated earlier, are very important. So make sure that when you study, you remember the content for each one, the purpose, the roles for sectors and sectors, the impact, and the abbreviations. Remember, with the information that we'll be having as content, you'll be able to apply that information in answering the questions in the question paper. And with this information, I hope you will be in a better position to answer any question that may be asked in the legislation. As you can see, a lot of marks are awarded for this section. You need to take it seriously. It's one of the easiest parts in business studies, wherein learners can score as many marks as possible. In all sections, Section A, Section B, and Section C, there's always a possibility to find one of them. And if you can prepare well, you can score yourself a lot of marks in this section on this topic. If there are any questions, for a few minutes, they can be addressed. Now that we don't have any questions, thank you very much for listening to this presentation. And this brings us to the end of the presentation on legislation and the business world. Like I indicated, please remember purpose, impact, implications, advantages, disadvantages. Thank you very much, and all the best in your exams.